Hey guys, this is Old Man Wags here with Dirkula Pressure Washers. What we're going to be doing today is talking to you about roof cleaning. What we're going to focus on is the proper way to clean an asphalt shingle roof. If you look over this entire roof line, what we're focusing on is the black algae stains, or our glowio caps of magma. We're going to be focusing on our green algae, and we're going to be focusing on our white lichen or lichen, depending on where you're from. What we're going to do is show you the proper techniques for cleaning the roof. We're going to talk about some chemical introductions as well as proper ratios for cleaning them, and then we're going to focus on some very basic roof safety tips. So to get us started, what I want to do is talk about the proper way to clean a roof. The easiest way to clean a roof is with a dedicated pump, and you'll basically throw a concentrated chemical solution onto the surface, let the chemical do its work, and then all but walk away from it at that point. The reason you don't want to use high pressure is asphalt shingle is not designed to take any kind of significant pressure. Your target for cleaning should be anywhere in the 100 to 500 psi range. Anything higher than that and you risk damaging the shingle itself. In addition to this is a asphalt shingle, which means it's bonded using some sort of petroleum base, or in a lot of cases tar. That means that as part of your formula, you should not be using anything that has a high pH or is known as an alkaline degreaser. The reason is what will happen is, once again, you'll start to break down, damage the shingle, and instead of prolonging the roof by cleaning, you'll actually make it wear out a little bit faster. In addition to that, the proper cleaning chemical that you should use to treat a roof would be sodium hypochlorite. You want to target to hit the surface anywhere between 2% and 6% would be considered a more than adequate solution to treat this roof. In either of those cases, the 2 or 6%, your goal is to basically be able to lightly mist the roof, not necessarily flood the surface, that's how you start damaging plants. But when you lightly mist the roof with a concentrated enough solution, you should instantly start to see some sort of chemical reaction take place. The most common one is all this black staining that's sitting on the roof is going to slowly start to turn brown. As that happens, you know you've picked a concentrated enough solution. If it happens way too quickly, meaning you get an instant reaction, that means you're probably a little too hot and you can stand to water down your mix a little bit. In line with our mix, we want to make up something that is not only full of sodium hypochlorite and water, but actually has something that has a sud that will stick to the surface. The reason that's important, if you just put water and sodium hypochlorite on here, if it's a steep enough pitch, it's just going to run right off and it won't actually give it enough dwell time to stick to the surface. Using something like Maximus Foam is a very easy way of getting your sud to lay even, lay flat, and really just stick to the surface for as long as possible, giving you the longest dwell time and letting it react with the surface longer. Another thing that's important to keep in mind is that everything you spray on these shingles is eventually going to work its way into this gutter line. What you want to do is take a few moments and really just make sure that this gutter line itself is clean, as well as the downspout is clear of any obstructions. You don't want any excessive leaf buildup. You don't want any sticks and stones to be sitting in there. You don't want anything that could potentially prevent your solution from flowing down the downspout smoothly. Because what will happen is, let's say there's stuff that's filled up to here in your gutter, preventing anything from falling down. Solution comes through, overflows the gutter, tips out the prop, and basically drops to the floor. This isn't a big deal on open and exposed homes like this, but if there was a lot of vegetation underneath or there was a front flower bed, that's where you start to risk damaging plants. By taking those few minutes just to make sure that gutter line is clear of obstruction, you can easily prevent yourself from a lot of headache in the future. While we're talking about the gutter line, let's talk about some runoff techniques. As your solution comes down the surface, like we talked about, we want it to go down the gutter, down the downspout, and then dump out somewhere in the yard, because we can control that. What if you prevented your solution from doing any damage before it even made it to the downspout? One way of doing that is by taking sodium thiosulfate and sprinkling it in your gutter line so that your solution, as it runs down the roof, is neutralized upon contact with that. The sodium thiosulfate reacts with the sodium hypochlorite, giving you a more neutral pH and a less aggressive detergent as it washes its way down the roof. Then by the time it makes it to the downspout and dumps into whatever part of the yard or garden bed, or really just part of the property that it's dumping into, it is a significantly less dangerous and significantly less caustic solution as it hits whatever surface it hits next. All right, so now that we got the basics, we've got our mix in our tank, we know what's going to work on this surface. I've already got our gutter line clean. Let's actually clean the roof and we'll see what kind of results we get. All right, so let's take a second and just talk about our first technique. I want to first point out that we are using our very own 10-meter Blitz by Dirkula. It's basically a dedicated soft wash system that has the capabilities of washing about 33 feet from the ground. We're standing about 15 to 20 feet back from the building, one story up, and I'm getting the roof peak. So that's easily a 32-foot shot
Doesn't look very impressive because it's a one-story rancher, but this translates to being able to clean roughly a two-story house roof from the ground without even having to whip out a ladder. Now, in this technique, what we're doing is flooding as high up as possible. You have a lot less control and overspray when you're doing this method, just because you are shooting a solid beam significantly further. But as you'll notice, you kind of have waves that are running down the roof. So in this context, that is our very own product called Maximus Foam. It's designed to cling as much to the roof as possible, and whatever is running off is actually cleaning and treating on its way down. Now, even though sequentially we're calling this technique number one, we did already do the gutter line technique, which we'll talk about in a second, on the left side of the roof. The reason we did that is it's very hard to control your overspray, and we wanted to basically make it very clear that as you're doing this, the first side of the roof that we did, in this case the left side, it is a very controlled spray pattern. It's doing everything, and I only got that area. Whereas if you'll notice here, we have a lot more runoff. We're using a lot more product, and it's not as controlled as it could be if we were closer to the surface. One of the other things that we're going to touch on in this video is if you're choosing a technique like this, you have to be very careful of plant overspray as well as window overspray. If there's plants on the ground, or if there's any kind of vegetation around whatever it is that you're cleaning, especially that gutter line, because again, you're using way more product, it's all going to be running down. You want to try something to neutralize that. Even if it's just setting a garden hose in the gutter itself, that'll do a decent job of neutralizing and diluting your runoff. But as you go ahead and look at this, I've barely spent any time whatsoever on the lower half of the roof, just because there is so much going straight up. It's already cleaned a good portion of it, and you can kind of see, we'll call it the temporary streaks as it's already cleaning stuff, and that's just where the solution runs. So now I can go back and lay just a light mist over top of the areas that were missed. And then the next thing that we'll do is spend just a second with a garden hose. So once again, because we're doing a little bit more of a further away method, we're going to get some more overspray. We need to make sure that we touch up the gutter line so we're not getting streaks on the house that we haven't technically washed yet, as well as we want to make sure that we are going to be rinsing down all the glass right there, just so that we don't get any micro etches on the surface and basically leave anything looking ugly or unsightly for the customer. By taking just a few minutes to do this, you save yourself a whole lot of headache and potentially a callback at the end of the day. All right, so let's take a second and just focus on technique number two, which in this case would be shooting from the gutter line or the roof line, depending on what type of ladder you're using. In this method, the first thing you're going to do is spray a very light mist right in front of you so you can get the chemical working and basically applied to the surface as soon as possible. The next thing you're going to do is start shooting further up as well as off to the side of you. Ideally, you'll position yourself on the roof where you only have to move your ladder 2 or 3 times per side. And basically you'll get as far as you are comfortable in one position and then turn around and do the other side of yourself. If you'll notice right here, we're kind of skipping around in little pockets. That's going to be the same for most of these methods. What we're going to do is basically lay down a layer of sud wherever it makes sense. And then just to control the runoff, we're just going to let it do its thing as it runs down the roof, see certain areas get treated, and basically we'll just kind of work around in circles or pockets until the entire roof has been coated in some type of treatment. And as you see right here, we're spending a little bit more time on the bottom as well as the roof line, and the reason for that, focusing on the peak, is just that is where it's the dirtiest. So just spray heavily in a couple areas, let it do its job, let it run off, let it do everything that the detergent's going to do, and then work back and retreat the areas that need a second application. All right, so let's take a second and just really focus on the last technique. Basically, this is the last technique, should be a last resort, because this involves actually physically getting up on the roof and washing down from the peak to the bottom. The reason that we say this is usually the last method is this is of course the most dangerous, because not only have you left the ladder at this point, but you're physically walking around on a roof while you're applying some sort of liquid to it. Think about the definition of what a surfactant does to the surface. It tends to make it wetter. It tends to make it less resistant to friction, and basically that's how it emulsifies and can break down dirt on the surface. That also means it's going to break down your traction and make things a lot more slippery while you're sitting there working like that. So you want to be very careful when using this technique. And once again, you can see we're kind of working in small pockets or waves and just getting everything to hit the surface in a dedicated way that is not only controlled, but also backing off of the overspray. This probably is one of the more controlled methods just because you're up close and personal. You can use a fan tip almost the entire time and really focus on where it is that you're spraying, as opposed to just blindly shooting something from the ground. Even on the lip right there where it just kind of left off the side of the roof, there really wasn't that much that dropped down. Once again, if there's vegetation there, you want to take note of this. wet everything down, possibly have a ground guy working to keep everything wet and on the surface. Basically, once you've treated everything properly, again, working in those small little pockets to keep the solution moving and on the surface, it really doesn't take that long to treat the entire roof, and it doesn't take very long to get the solution down on the surface as long as you're doing it correctly. Theoretically, the gutter is going to catch the majority of this that's going straight down, and that kind of gives us a doorway for where it's going to go and gives us an idea of how we can once again control the runoff that is coming off the roof.
The last part of this video that I want to address is why we typically don't rinse when we're cleaning a roof. If you think about the process of roof cleaning, you're using a highly concentrated chemical, you're throwing it on the roof, and then you're letting it sit there and saturate into the surface. Number one, you want that to dwell as long as is realistically possible. Even if you're rinsing the surface after, say, an hour or two, you're still not letting it sit there to its fullest potential, which means that you're wasting a little bit of chemical and potentially it could get a little bit cleaner. By contrast, if you throw the solution on there, let it bake in the sun, let it completely saturate into the surface, and then just leave it, even if it's only for a day before another rainstorm, what's going to happen is you're going to get a deeper clean. But this also comes with the expectation of telling the customer, this will only look its best after several rainstorms. You're going to see an immediate drastic improvement, just like we see right here on this roof. However, it's not perfect until several rainstorms have passed, and by that I mean actual rainstorms, not just light drizzles, and everything has actually flushed itself free. This does mean in some cases, if say a month or two goes by and you're not seeing instant results, it could mean that you didn't treat it enough, or there just was so much growth on the surface that you may have to do a second treatment on a second return visit. All that means is you have to come back, spend 15 minutes spraying, and then you're good to go. The most important part is getting everything treated. Once it starts changing that color, it's a pretty obvious sign that it's been treated, and then, like discussed, our first rainstorm will really just take care of it. So all of that stuff that we went over can be explained deeper. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out in the comments section below. This is dirtkiller.com. Let's kill some dirt.
Dirt Killer. Let's kill some dirt.